Welcome to the Deliberate Leaders Podcast. I am your host and executive business coach, Allison Dunn. Our topic today is belonging and beyond, shaping tomorrow through diversity, education, and tech. Our guest is Cordell Carter. He is the executive director for the Aspen Institute Socrates Program, which is a leading global organization, education forum for leaders learning from leaders. He is the founding director of the Aspen Institute Project on Belonging, which equips leaders to create society where everyone belongs and enjoys equitable opportunities to thrive. Cordell, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Off with a deliberate conversation. What would be your number one leadership tip for our listeners today?
There's a good reason most of us have 2 ears, 1 mouth. We're supposed to listen twice as much as we speak. So listen.
I share this consistently on the podcast when listening comes up. I feel like that's my superpower is the ability to listen, and I just really feel that leaders don't necessarily do it all of that well. So outstanding tip. Thank you for that. Cordell, your topic today is around the concept of belonging, and I think you've even positioned it as the next phase of the nation's conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusions. So I just want to tee it up to kind of open it up, and then I have some specific questions around that.
Yeah, I believe we're in need of a new national narrative. We've created a political and social culture where the way we behave online is showing up in life, real life. We're forgetting our humanity. We're trolling each other. We're so coarse in our dialogue. And we've forgotten our magic sauce, and that is that we are different, and that those differences are our superpower. I think back to visiting the Delphi Oracle in Greece a couple years ago, and looking at the Temple of Apollo and looking at the wall, the foundation wall, 3,500 years old. The very first version of the wall, those original architects, there was looked like mosaic. Okay, you look at the Roman version, you can see the Roman cement, and then you see the Christian version. All the stones are exactly the same with a cross on them. Well, in places of great tectonic activity, anything unstable is going to fall. So it didn't really matter how much grout you had in the Christian wall, it fell. Doesn't matter how strong the Roman cement is, it fell. The only wall that still remains is the original wall. No adhesives, no grout, no cement. But they found a place for every stone, okay? That's what society should be, finding a place for everybody. Your thriving is different from my thriving, but we both belong. That's the point. And that is what I'm pushing, this new national narrative on belonging. I call it the Sermon on the Civic Mount. And
call it a what?
The Civic Mount, Sermon on the Civic Mount.
Okay.
And I am finding that is resonating with a lot of audiences.
What a beautiful visual that you just gave regarding the wall and the idea that finding a place for every stone. What do you think needs to happen in order for our society to embrace that?
We have to think about our lives like a balloon that you fill with air, and you squeeze one side, the air doesn't escape, it just goes to the other side and makes the other side harder. We are all connected. My success is attributive to you, and your success is attributive to me. I'm not saying that you're going to give me something. I'm merely saying I don't want to live in a world where only I thrive and you don't. Okay, that's not good for anyone. That's not good for GDP. It's not good for our national standing. And once we understand that creating an environment where everyone has opportunities to thrive is a good thing for me, and stop being so self-focused and narcissistic and selfish, then we'll get it. Then we'll understand why our collective futures are intertwined. And so I'm trying to get us back to kindergarten-like rules. Remember the Raffi song, "It's mine, but you can have some. With you, I'd like to share it, because if I shared with you, you'll have some too." He was talking about cake, but I'm talking about this national enterprise we call the United States of America. There's so much here. There's so much opportunity, but we can't keep playing zero-sum games. They don't really exist. They only exist in our minds. And we're destroying a great thing. The United States of America is tremendous. I think there's a land of unlimited opportunity, and we're blowing it. We are blowing it. And there's no external force making us do that, just us losing our humanity.
In your introduction, I know I shared the fact that you bring leaders from all over the world together. Like, give me some insight into the depth of those conversations and what do you think is possible in this coming few years, like that you will see as a change in our humanity?
The Aspen Institute was started in 1949 by some extraordinarily wealthy men
Mhm.
trying to find a common humanity, right? So they would go far away from their normal homes in Chicago, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they would go out in the woods of Aspen and put on togas and do Antigone, and they would hunt and they would fish and they would just hang out together in a non-competitive space and then go back home feeling much better having cultivated relationships. That same ethos reigns in all 80 of the programs of the Aspen Institute, the Socrates program being one of the closer derivatives of that original experience, because we're doing text-based dialogue on a variety of topics. For instance, last month in Poland, we were talking about the future of the EU and the transatlantic accord. Now, whether you're Polish, Hungarian, or American, that impacts you. And you're thinking about, like, do I want to start a company in this environment where Russia is literally 300 kilometers over there, shooting at people? Do I feel safe? Do I feel secure? These are relevant conversations to today's moment. And so whether it's cybersecurity, the transatlantic accord, the future of AI, the future of labor, those are the type of really intimate conversations that we're having. And I think one of the unique facets of that is that these are closed doors. There's only the 25 people in the room. And we have really simple rules. You have Chatham House rule: what's said here stays here. And if you're going to repeat it outside, don't attribute it to anyone. Okay. And secondly, mutual respect. I'm gonna let you finish before I'm gonna listen to you first. So we're actually practicing that age-old art of being humane to each other, of listening before we speak and listening to understand rather than to respond. This is not a debating society, it's a learning society. And that is what we're hoping to model, like getting these leaders to model that in their companies. It's my hope that, every leader is curating an upwardly mobile experience for the people that purposely avail themselves to their leadership. Like, it is my job to make sure my people are smarter because I lead them. They're here. Like, I want to add value, whether they're here for 8 months or 8 years. I want to add value to them. And you'll find that sentiment is pretty common. They're taking the readings with them and saying, you know what, I'm going to use this on my team when I get back to Chicago or wherever I'm going. And so these are some really robust dialogues. I've curated 200 of them over the last 7 years. And so much so that I'm forgetting, like, which one is which and how did I meet you? Was it Chicago? Where did we meet again? I just know that we know each other because we're on LinkedIn at some time. And so I find it to be absolutely exhilarating. I wish that everyone could experience what I get to experience about 30 times a year around the world.
I know that from a corporate setting, obviously programs that address diversity, inclusion, DEI, like equity. Is there a better way that we could go about it that's obvious to you or that is being discussed inside of your forums?
Yeah, the issue with DNI is that it started off as a very simple question during the Nixon administration. Tell us about who works for your company. You're doing business with the government wants to know who works there. It became a de facto standard. People started getting points on the procurement scale out of 100 as you respond to RFPs if you were presenting this data. And the whole industry was built around one tactic, one strategy, a strategy that doesn't have a destination. That's the problem with DNI as I see it. It's not attached to anything. And so you get to confer whatever you want upon it. It's compliance, it's reverse racism, it's all these different things you can say because it's not tied to anything. This is why I talk about belonging, because belonging is the outcome we're trying to achieve. DNI is a strategy to get there, not the strategy. I am completely open to other strategies. In fact, everyone should be. But long as we sequence it properly, belonging is a conversation that your executive leaders have with each other and the organization. D&I is just a strategy that inside the organization, they try to achieve an environment where people belong and thrive. But D&I is not the outcome. It's a method. And we've made the method the thing, and no wonder people are disturbed by it. So I'm not surprised. It's a sequencing issue, and frankly, a lack of forethought as this industry has developed over the last 45, 50 years, just took a life of its own. And, if you were to look at the different definitions of D&I, it would look like a scatter map, like somebody shot a shotgun in the target, just beads everywhere. It's just all over the place. And it really shouldn't be that way. So I think that's one of the primary problems, that it's not tied to an outcome. And so I'm trying to resequence it and tie it to an outcome and let people know this is a method. Just come up with a different one. I'm fine with that. As long as we're trying to create an environment where people belong and have opportunities to thrive, we're saying the same thing.
What's fascinating is I've worked for engineering and architecture firms for several decades prior to doing what I do today. And I guess I personally didn't realize that, we were an 8A, a disadvantaged, an MBE, a DBE, a WBE, like all of the things that HubZone,
Yes.
things we would like create teaming agreements around and go win contracts to do. I didn't realize that that was the start of this. So that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, the federal government is responsible for between 1/5 and 1/4 of GDP. Every Fortune 1000 company, their biggest customer is the federal government. Don't you find it a little odd that people like, I don't want to pay taxes, really? Well, how do we pay you, my friend? Just a question. I don't know. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so I find that fascinating. If in your wisdom and experience, if you were to say that was created without a specific end game or validation point, like what would that be?
Well, the validation point is a more equitable distribution of resources.
Okay.
If this is a government for the people, by the people, of the people, what does that look like from an economic standpoint? You certainly can't have all of the benefits or the vast majority accrue to a small set of people. That doesn't make sense. You also have to contend with history. We have a lot of bad facts in this amazing experiment we call the United States of America. So how do you contend with what I call those extra constitutional methods that have actually kept certain parts of our population out of an economy they've helped create? You must contend with that. Otherwise, you'll always have animus and concern and cries of unfairness. You have to contend with history as well. So how do you do that in a fair way is the question. And so what the federal procurement officers and city procurement officers have done is say, okay, we're going to have set-asides to ensure that certain companies that are created by women of color, women and men and women of color have contracts just for them as they seek to build and grow as others have. That is, again, a method. I don't know about other methods, but I am completely open to other methods of getting us to a place where people feel like they have an equal opportunity in, the economic largesse of this country.
Yeah. I deeply appreciate the idea that it's not a DEI conversation, but a belonging conversation. So I'm going to hand you my proverbial pen magic wand.
Mm.
Do you accept it?
I do. Thank you.
What would you do with the magic wand?
The magic wand, I would give everyone a lobotomy. I would give us a national lobotomy, literally like I'm trying to think of the movie where the Men in Black, where you flash the light at them and you can reprogram them. And that reprogramming would be the following. We are all equal on this earth. We all have an equal shot at success. Whether you use it to the benefit or your detriment, that's on you. But I am personally not going to prevent anyone from achieving what they want to achieve. I'm going to do my best for me and my family and hope that others do the best for them and their families. That alone resets the game. It gets rid of tribalism, othering, all of that stuff. When did you come to this country? How did you come to this country? Are you legitimate, illegitimate? No, get rid of all of that. And we're just people. We're just people here for a very limited amount of time trying to make something out of nothing. That's all we are.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I like your magic wand. I'll take it back. I need it for
All right.
later. Um, my one of my thought processes is how can civil discourse and leadership convene to create transformative outcome in the context of diversity and inclusion? And I'd love your insights on that.
Yeah, civil discourse is a lost art. There used to be debating societies, used to be a lot before we had, handheld devices with supercomputers in our hands. We actually had to talk to each other. I was looking at a grunge fest from 1999. It was the summer before smartphones took over. And I saw everyone dancing. It was shocking. I was trying to explain to my daughter, who's 17, who's never lived in a world where we actually had a phone inside our home that was attached to a wall. Okay. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
None of that long cord down the hall so you can have privacy, right? um, and she just can't imagine, like, they just dance. I'm like, yeah, no one's checking the news, no one's looking at Reddit. And so the reason I love civil discourse, especially the way we do it at the Aspen Institute, is that the phones are left outside. If you're waiting for a transplant, you probably shouldn't be up in the mountains with us anyway. And so there's nothing super important that's pressing on you, a sick relative. Just leave the phone outside and let's engage each other. And you'll find that people calm down. All your vitals calm. You're just much more relaxed and you're engaged. And it actually tires you out because the brain isn't used to working like that anymore. We've rewired ourselves. And so how does that get us to transformational results? When you truly listen to others. Because to me, it's a three-part conversation. You're convening and engaging the ancients or the texts, if you will. You're engaging each other, and then you're engaging yourself. All right. That's a three-part conversation. And so if you're truly engaged in a three-part conversation, you can't help but be transformed. When I first did Socrates in 2011 as a participant, I was a lobbyist for a certain business association. And I left that weekend under the absolute belief and conviction that I was part of the problem. I was part of the problem why we can't move forward as a society. And I stopped seeing the world through my LinkedIn view. Like, this looks good for the CV. This is going to look good on LinkedIn. And are my values and my time aligning? And I couldn't say the answer was yes. And so I had to do something different. And so that's what the conclusion we want everyone to come to. Like, this isn't just learning for learning's sake. This is learning for your sake. How are you being transformed by this information about what you're hearing from others and how one person reads the same document as you and comes with a completely different perspective you've never heard of? Okay. Um, and so I've seen dramatic change. I've seen companies being created on the fly in the middle of conversations. People stop talking, start writing things down, leave the room, and create companies. Okay, we have several dozen examples of that. I've seen relationships form, permanent relationships, marriages form out of conversation. Like, she's super smart. I think I need to get to know her, that type of thing. And so I've also seen people break up. It's like, we are not aligned in values. So this values collision cannot stand. And so it's a lost art. There's a good reason we can communicate so well. There's a good reason we have thousands and thousands of words in our vocabulary. We are supposed to use them, not type them out. We're supposed to speak to each other. We're supposed to engage each other. And I'm finding as we come back to the real basics of humanity, transformation follows soon after.
Yeah. The kind of the topic that we gave today's podcast is belonging and beyond, shaping tomorrow through diversity, education, and technology. You've brought up technology several times in this conversation in how it's helped us and maybe even how it's hurt us. So what role does technology play in bridging the gap for, your perception of this greater version of belonging?
Yeah, tech could be a great equalizer. It's also can be a gap sustainer, if you will. We have only asked a question, can tech? And I'm saying we should probably ask, should tech? I'll give you an example. 30 years ago, as China was developing, there were millions of low-wage, low-skilled jobs available. And so you could put people to work building things, and they became this great exporter that built the second largest economy in the world. Now comes the continent of Africa, that's going to have 2.5 billion people in the next 30 to 40 years, with an extra 500 million people between the ages of 16 and 35 coming online in the next 15 to 20 years. The tech jobs that would have been available, I'm sorry, the low skill, low wage jobs would have been available for them just as China was developing just 20 years ago will not exist because of AI. We've automated those tasks. Okay. So what happens when you can't employ people who want to be employed? Bad things happen. Okay. The same dynamic we're seeing in the US. I should say we've seen in the US when NAFTA comes along and you're getting low wage, I'm sorry, low cost shipping. The Midwest essentially fell upon itself, and those factories, those jobs went south. We didn't have a great solution for those displaced workers. We basically said that's the cost of development. This is called creative destruction. Well, that's not very pleasant to hear if you're the one being destroyed. We have to come up with a better answer. So I think just focusing on tech without its implications and a remedy for its implications on people is highly problematic. And hopefully we've learned from our past. I'm thinking 1994 forward when NAFTA came in, that we won't do that to each other again. I'm especially concerned about the African continent, a place that has known a lot of violence and revolution, especially over the last 30 years. What could happen when you have all of a sudden, 500 extra million people? That's a lot of people to employ and to feed, to clothe, and to house. And so we as a global community have to be a little more thoughtful with our innovation to ensure that we're asking the should question first rather than the can.
Well, obviously AI has, it's here, right? And it's
Oh yeah,
evolved.
it's here.
What should we be thinking about in a more global perspective, which I appreciate, like when I think about AI, I think about how to streamline things, not does it leave people jobless, right?
Yeah.
Truly.
Mhm.
What should we be considering?
Yeah, what are the things that truly makes our life better? I make a lot of fun of dating apps because I had to date before you had to actually risk rejection, and I tell the stories about, you ask someone to dance at a club. She's already dancing, by the way, and she says, no, thanks. And you pick your face up and you go and you ask someone else, right? Your buddies laugh at you, but it's okay. Like you build the emotional musculature to
Yeah.
contend with rejection. And what tech has done over the last 25 years is bubble wrap us all. This
Mm.
is why people are so out of control emotionally. Adults can't control themselves when something negative happens. They don't know how to behave. This is no swipe right or left type of situation. And so I think in many ways we have just innovated for innovation purposes and not really thought about implications. So with that lens of like, what does this mean for humanity? We should start listing the things that we would love humanity to not have to deal with. I think some of our environmental degradation, if there is a way that AI can help clean up rivers, clean up water sources, generate clouds to lower the temperature of the earth so we wouldn't have so much ice melt. We should be using AI to tackle the world's problems, not to make more money. Okay. We need humans to make money so they can buy things. Okay. That's important for our economy. But we only have one use case. How can I get more profit per hour for the next widget being made? And I'm saying at some point you run out of people to purchase the things you save all this money building. Like, where's your macroeconomic brain as you reflect upon these things? And I think this is the call for more diversity when it comes to algorithm design. And I'm not talking about ethnic diversity. I'm talking about experiential diversity,
Okay.
political, ideological diversity, geographic diversity, people that have seen the world from different places. They need to be part of the design team. Because if you design it right, you won't have built-in bias. For instance, for a while, I traveled internationally a lot. As a dark complected person, the facial recognition wasn't working on global entry. It just never worked for me. That changed after a big lawsuit a couple of years ago. So now no problem. They had to just adjust the design of the AI of the algorithm inside the machine to pick up pigmented skin or people that are heavily melanated. And so you can imagine how frustrating that is when the vast majority of the world's travelers look like me. Okay. So if they look like me, who the hell designed it? People who didn't look like me.
Right.
That's a problem, right? Like who are you building it for exactly? And so I think that who is this for? And is this a good thing? Should we do it? Should be your first design questions. After you figure out what is the issue that's going to make humanity better. And it will not be dating. It will not be construction of widgets. It's going to be much bigger issues that our brains alone can't solve.
I'm going to send this episode to who should we send it to have them put AI on creating our waterways and rivers and oceans?
I'm sure there's some
Thank you.
folks at MIT. Uh, but you start thinking about it like supercomputing power, and you think of all the different possibilities that can actually get you to a solution set.
Yeah.
That's the perfect use for AI.
It,
Um, like, hey, there are maybe 15,000 possible scenarios to solve this environmental issue. Who can think? No, humans can't do that fast, but an AI powered machine could. Let them sick it on that. These big intractable issues that are politically challenging to solve because, humans are involved. Let's take the humans out of tough things. Let's do that. And I'm not talking about dating. Ask her to dance. It's okay.
uh, absolutely. Cordell, I have really appreciated our conversation, the refreshing perspective around humanity and belonging, and just deeply appreciate the work you do. And you can borrow my magic wand anytime.
Thank you.
Just let me know when you need it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.